I think if Walt visited the villas at Wilderness Lodge today, he would walk in here and look around and I think have a great appreciation for the attention to detail.
It's a place of peace and repose and harmony and healing and a whole bunch of things.
We were looking for something that was very warm and very inviting and not intimidating.
The cut stone, the hand-hewn beams, the legacy of the early park villas that were so popular 100 years ago.
It's quietness here. You get away from the noise of the parks.
One of the things that makes the Wilderness Lodge and the villa so popular is it's an upscale property. It is not intimidating.
The way in which people got to know the West was by railroad. And when the railroads had sufficient ridership or began to develop ridership, they also had to provide hotels for them. So there were a series of railroad hotels that got built. So it was a pretty easy way for us to say, let's go back in time and let's make the villas feel like a railroad hotel.
For many areas of the country, the only way to get to them was by rail. And the great national parks in this country were connected by railroad. And the developments of the lodges in these national parks, the materials were brought in on rail, and the guests were brought in on rail. So you have a tradition between Walt's vision for how to entertain guests and how the early national parks were set up. They were all connected by railroad.
First of all, we are a storytelling company. We are an entertainment company, and that is our core business. Having a storyline for each resort or property, whether it's retail, dining, entertainment, cruise ship, is that it promotes consistency throughout the design.
What we tried to do was to capture a sense of what the West was all about and what the national parks was all about. And the research that went into that really focused on, I think, what has become now known, I think, because of the Wilderness Lodge more than anything else, the story behind the history of a true American architecture.
The thing that we're looking for mostly is consistency. Now, when I say consistency, I don't mean it has to be exactly the same. The one thing we didn't want to do was make a building that looked exactly the same as the Lodge. I think everybody agreed that would be a mistake. So part of the storyline, we're looking for something that's similar, a Pacific Northwest hotel, but different. And it's made different mainly by the time period in which it was built.
In many ways, this building almost designed itself. We looked at the Wilderness Lodge as a historic building. If you were to build any building next to a historic building, the first thing you do is you try to understand what it is and how do you respect it.
One of the things that we did to bring the two buildings together was we use a color palette, a lot of greens, a lot of reds, and there's stone in both buildings. In some cases, it's in Wilderness Lodge, it's granite and slate. In the villas, it's all granite. The roofs of the two buildings, it's a green standing seam metal roof in the Wilderness Lodge and a red asphalt shingle roof on the villas. They're colors that complement each other. One of the log carvers who worked on the Wilderness Lodge, he lives in Orlando. He's actually in that world, he's pretty famous. We asked him to carve animal heads in the horizontal logs in the atrium.
We brought into the atrium the idea It's essentially an idea of the medicine wheel. And the medicine wheel is a Native American symbol of the unity of man, seasons, and animals. So you see migratory birds in the wintertime and in the springtime. You'll see harvests that take place at the same time that animals are, they're beginning to hibernate or shed their horns, and all that's put together in a series of symbolic graphics and design in the atrium.
Part of the interior storyline is that, and this is actually an actual practice from some of the railroad hotels, the way that some guests paid for their stay was by bringing furniture on the train with them, maybe not the best furniture they had, bringing furniture with them and leaving it at the end of their stay. And that's how they actually paid for their stay in the hotel. If you look hard enough and long enough, you could probably find a couple of hidden Mickeys in the rooms. I'm not saying you'll find them, but if you look on the shower curtains in the studios or in the bedspread, you might be rewarded. There's two different carpets, the carpet in the corridor and the carpet inside the room. As you're walking down the corridor, imagine that you're outside. So you're walking across, or you're walking through the forest, and around you are pine leaves and pine cones. You arrive at your door, and the room is your cabin. Maybe it's a cabin with a dirt floor, or maybe with even some pine cones on it, but conceptually, you have the main building with the fireplace and the atrium and the big chandelier, and then you have your cabin. It's your little piece of the wilderness. The Iron Spike Room is the heart of the villas, and it's an important room because it makes a link between the railroad hotels of the Old West and Walt's love of trains.
If you sit in this room and look around and look at some of the collectibles here from his railroad hobby and photographs on the wall, and it would remind him of the times he spent engaged in this hobby that he loved so much of miniature railroading, that later we saw on larger scale at Disneyland and here at Disney World. The only object in all the Disney parks that's named after Walt is one of those steam locomotives, the Walter E. Disney. One of the photographs here in the Iron Spike Room is a picture of Walt posed in front of engine number 2, the E.P. Ripley, with Mickey. And that was taken on June 18, 1955 at Disneyland. And the expression on Walt's face really tells it all. He was so proud of that locomotive. That was the first operational attraction in Disneyland, was that steam engine. The 2 freight cars that are on display here in the Iron Spike Room were loaned by the Disney family through Retlaw Enterprises. Of course, Retlaw is Walter spelled backward. And they represent Walt's interest in railroad history, because on the side of the cattle car we see the initials CPRR. Well, that stands for the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad, which was, of course, the name that Walt had on the miniature railroad. But they also represent the Central Pacific Railroad, which is the railroad that was the prototype for the miniature in the backyard.
We've got a great site, we've got a great neighbor, we've got a terrific story to tell, and if I can make a building that's a charming and pleasing building, and an exciting building, and an intimate building, then I've done my job. That's all I hope to do, and make your guests and the members of the club feel comfortable here, which I think they do. I think they feel comfortable here.
When I think of all the legacies that Walt left for us, probably the most important lesson that he taught was the value of families spending time together. He and Lillian used to love to take their 2 daughters, Diane and Sharon, on trips. They'd go and visit resorts, go on cruises together. And that time that Diane remembers to this day with her father, now the grandkids talk about Grandpa on wonderful trips. Those are real treasured memories. And I think that's what the Vacation Club represents, is that legacy, what Walt taught us about that valuable time together.